there. Welcome back to The Independence, where we are your friends, but we'll never be your bronies or your cronies. Utah Senator Mike Lee made waves when he helped fellow Senator Ted Cruz shut down the government, and now he has a new crusade against Republican cronyism. We spoke with him earlier today.
I think the way we win this argument is to point out the reasons why we need to do it. I mean, there are several reasons I can think of right off the top of my head. First of all, we need to do this because it's good for the economy. We know that most net job creation in America occurs within smaller, newer businesses, those that have been around for 5 years or less. And these crony capitalism-driven programs that are the target of this movement help larger, more established incumbents in the marketplace, and they tend to hurt and crowd out newer upstart companies. Secondly, we need to make the case that this needs to be done because it's fair. It's in the interest of fairness that we get rid of crony capitalism. Most Americans understand intuitively that it's wrong for government to be picking winners and losers in the marketplace. Third, I think this will be a winning issue with Republicans because we as Republicans tend to stand behind these very principles of limited government, principles that say government ought to be staying out of the marketplace. It certainly shouldn't be deciding who makes a profit and who doesn't based on their political connections. If you're willing to work hard, and if you're willing to play by the rules, you ought to be able to succeed, and you ought to be able to do that without undue interference from government programs.
You're targeting the Ex-Im Bank, Export-Import Bank, and urging your fellow conservatives and everybody to vote against this corporate welfare boondoggle. The Ex-Im Bank's biggest client over the years has been Boeing. It's just been a Boeing entrenchment machine. It suggests possibly that one of the biggest areas for this type of corporate welfare is in defense spending. The more money you're spending on the military and defense, the more Boeing is going to be doing this because Boeing's big and people like to get elected. Don't you have to cut military spending, period, to go after crony capitalism?
No, I don't think the two need to be connected at all. And what we're talking about here is financing for equipment produced by some major U.S. corporations, significantly here Boeing. But that doesn't mean that we have to cut military spending in order to walk away from crony capitalism. What we're talking about with respect to the Ex-Im Bank is that we don't need the government to be playing a role that the private sector can play not just as well, but better than the government.
Now, I know that there is an appetite for this sort of cutting amongst the American people. I wonder if there is that sort of appetite on Capitol Hill. Do you think that we actually are at a moment where you can push something like this and build a coalition of conservatives that are willing to finally get this issue taken care of? They talk a good game, but they've yet to deliver on this.
Yes. Look, there's no question this is an uphill climb. But I also believe, for the reasons that you have just suggested, that this is a very good time to be doing this and that we could actually win this. If enough Americans make known their desire to not have government putting its thumb heavily on the scales in the marketplace, if enough Americans make known to their senators and their congressmen that they don't want government picking winners and losers in industry, then we will not continue to fund these programs. We will not continue to authorize them, and we won't reauthorize the Ex-Im Bank.
And perhaps this is part of, putting a kinder, gentler face on the Republican Party, making it very clear that Republicans do stand for fiscal responsibility, and that is something that's popular with Americans. But a number of the Americans you're reaching out to are some folks who were turned off by the government shutdown not too many moons ago. Have you reconsidered the decisions that were made around that time, or do you think that was still the right call?
Well, look, I still think it's tragic what happened in connection with the government shutdown. I think it was absolutely tragic that the President of the United States chose to shut down the federal government rather than achieve any degree of compromise when it came to funding for his signature health care reform. The whole impetus for all of this was that the President of the United States refused to follow the law and started modifying that law without any statutory or constitutional authority to do so by the stroke of the executive pen. He doesn't have authority to do this, and that prompted some of us to say, if the president's not willing to follow the law, we're not going to fund his implementation of that law. So we proposed funding everything else in government except that, and he refused to accept any compromise. He said, unless you're willing to fund everything in government, I won't let you fund anything in government. And he shut down the government and caused a lot of pain on the American economy. And I think that was a shameful moment in our history that the President of the United States chose to take that action.
All right, so let me ask you, how do you repeal Obamacare? If enough people are unhappy with it, where do you go from here?
Well, obviously, it's not going to be repealed in this Congress, with this Senate being under the control of the president's party. You know, there's always a possibility that after this November, if Republicans secure a majority in the Senate, we could be in a much better position to do something about it. Even then, we'll have to deal with President Obama still in the White House, who will still wield the presidential veto power. But I think what we have to do is offer the American people an alternative. It's not enough simply to suggest that we can go back to the pre-Obamacare status quo. It's not really an option, practically speaking, at this point. What we do need is to offer up alternatives that are based on free market principles that will put Americans back in charge of their own health care decisions.
Yeah, Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal did just that. He has offered up a plan. There are other models that are sort of floating around, and we would be very curious to see yours. We're definitely going to hear your tax plan on our Friday show. Thank you very much, Senator Lee.
Thank you very much.
All right.